Okay, and we are live. All right, everybody, you should be seen in there, and we're just going to make sure everything's up and working. I have got Michele Fiore here, and this is Gavin, of course, and we're going to talk about what's happening in Oregon, what happened in Oregon last week, but also what's going on right now and in the courts and things like that, so we can get you up to speed, and you can find out what you can do to help and how we can keep the message going. So, Michele, hey, I'm glad you're here.
Thank you for having me, Gavin.
Yeah, this should be good. And, we had quite a week last week, and I know that the Patriots of America really appreciate your effort and Mike Arnold's and the other representatives. And at the end of the day, for getting the Patriots out safely, I think most of us would give credit to God, but at the same time, there's a lot of people working hard to make sure that the FBI didn't just go in there and commit murder again. So I think that it's quite a message, and we learned a lot last week.
It was definitely eye-opening. It was unexpected, and definitely wasn't something on the agenda for Wednesday evening.
Right. Yeah, I know. And when that call came in, and it was like, okay, what do we do now? And so there's some things that you really can't plan for. And I think a lot of times what we're seeing is that political groups and organized stuff, sometimes it takes so long to get there and get everything in place that the damage is already done. And so I think all of us in America, patriots, need to learn to be Minutemen again. And it's different maybe now than it was in 1776. We have different tools and different resources because the goal is to avoid violence. The goal is to expose darkness to light and make a difference that way so we can try and save liberty. But first of all, do you want to, most people know who you are, but just tell us who you are, just in case.
So my name is Michele Fiore. I'm an assemblywoman in Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm a two-term assemblywoman in Las Vegas. I'm running for Congress right now. But I will tell you, one of the things about me is I am truly like a fighter for our people. And so that's who I am.
Right. And we need people. I mean, look, this is what I want to point out to the world when you're looking for, your representatives. And we need to send people to federal Congress that can be spokesmen and tenacious, because we know that a congressman's not going to walk in and fix the federal government just like that at this point. But it's a powerful voice for the people to have somebody in there who's actually representing, because most representatives aren't. But the same at a state and a local level. People would really start electing sheriffs. And the problem people have is they hear a few good things in a political forum, or they say, the candidate says Constitution a few times, and we're so desperate. We're so terribly desperate for hope in this country that, we hear a few good things and people are like, well, he's our man. And what you need to start looking for is real action, not a candidate who gets up there and says, well, when elected, I'm going to do this and this and this. The tyranny has been going for a long time. And you need to look at not what they're going to do, prove it by what you have done, by the stands you're taking. And this is one of the great things about Michele, is that you put yourself on the line, you get a lot of unpopular opinion, and that to me is representing. To me, representing, especially in this day and age, more laws is not what's fixing our country. We need less laws, but we need representatives that represent. And that's what you did to me in Oregon that day, is you actually represented what you're there to represent.
I have to tell you that one of the things that is most important, like you said, is action. And a lot of times here in Nevada, there's a few of us that catch a lot of heat for that. Assemblywoman Shelley Shelton and Assemblyman John Moore, who was up there. And then we had our Idaho reps. And then, of course, we had Matt Shea. It's very, very difficult what took place Wednesday when you think a group of us we were meeting in Portland to meet with the attorneys and see what we can do to get our folks out of jail, to see who we have to talk to see what charges they were charged with, and it's all bogus because in my opinion, and I'm not an attorney, but I have to tell you, the more and more I study this, it's very, very scary. In my opinion, worst case scenario, you're looking at a bunch of cowboys camping in the middle of nowhere at a refugees with what they're claiming to be federal property, which once upon a time was personal property, which I still haven't seen the legislative approval from Oregon that the federal government actually purchased the refuge. But on top of all of that, even let's say they did something wrong, you're looking at our folks are basically prisoners for their political free speech, and in worst case scenario, civil disobedience, which is maybe a misdemeanor, which would be out on bail. I mean, you're talking, they have these men who are heads of their households, who bring in the income, who do all the chores, and now all of a sudden you have the people at home with no father, no helper. I mean, the ripple effect of what the justice or injustice is just heart-wrenching.
Absolutely. And really, this goes back to, to this Constitution right here. It goes back to natural law. And the reality is, I don't know why it's so complicated for America. We're always saying, well, there's this statute and that statute. There is no law that violates the higher law that can be law. And so when you have a federal government illegally occupying our land, and we say, no, we're just going to go in and use our land again. And then they say, well, you're breaking this statute and this statute and this statute, be it a misdemeanor, be it a felony, whatever. It's not law. And the problem is what our judges are perpetrating is not law. What the so-called probable cause is not law. And so we've lost the rule of law in this country. And maybe you can speak to that. But let's go back to the beginning, Michele, and let's talk about, okay, most people here, if they're taking the time to listen to this, they probably heard the live stream or most of it. We have over 500 people in the live stream right now, and it's growing. I'm sure we won't get 60,000 because it's not exactly world news today. But these are the people that really want to know what's really happening in our country. And so let's talk about that a little bit. What we heard was up to the point of we were talking to David. Everybody else had gone out. On the second day, David was left. And so everybody's kind of trying to figure out what to do. And then Mike's working in the background, and it sounds like he got the call to you or to somebody there on the front, and he also got that call to us, and we were getting ready to play it. And we can kind of hear it on the phone a little bit in the background. And then David says, okay, we're going to go out, and everybody says hallelujah, and he goes out. And then we hear that phone disconnected. So what is kind of your take on this, and what can you tell people? What did you see on the ground there from everyone?
Well, so this is what I saw, and there was actually footage captured there was a helicopter, I think Channel 12, that actually has the footage, and maybe we can request it. Right. But they have a lot of footage. They actually have David coming out with his hands up. I mean, they have live footage, and I'll email you a link to what I saw today. But so what took place was when we were on the live stream, Gavin, and when Graham and I got into the Bearcat, Graham and I were off the live stream until we got to the refuge. And then once we got to the refuge, I believe you and Chris were on the live stream, and then I was on the FBI phone. Right. And so talking about his grievances. And let me tell you, I had such a long conversation today with Bill Fry, David's dad, and what an amazing man he is. And David Fry had these grievances that haven't been addressed, and these grievances are really real, and I have the same grievances as well. Why should I have to pay for everyone else's abortions? Why should I have to give half of my paycheck away to things that I don't want to? Why should I mean, all of these grievances that David was talking about, he's absolutely right. And it's tyranny. What all the grievances he literally talked about was tyranny.
Yes. Yeah, and they were very real grievances. And the reality is, I mean, look, the whole world listened. The media can spin it any way they want, but we were there. The world was listening. We heard the FBI in the background on that first night. They were there for blood. They were there to instigate, and that's exactly what they were doing. So the media is trying desperately to spin this like, well, in the end, the FBI negotiated this and we fixed it. And because they want to make themselves out to be the good guy. But it's very important that America understands the FBI were the instigators from the very beginning. The FBI were the instigators in illegally blocking a road and murdering Lavoy Finicum and setting up that ambush. The FBI were instigating this night as they were in the background. I mean, it was like watching trolls on the internet as they were in the background shouting at them, no one supports you. I mean, this is not negotiating in any negotiation book. And the Patriots made a bold outcry, and the world heard. And with that and the pressure behind the scenes, and that light shined on their dark ways, they had to back off. And so that next morning, it seems like, Michele, their behavior was a little different. It sounds like they kind of knew they were being watched, and you were there, and Franklin Graham was there. And so they knew the eyes of the world were on them. And it doesn't really sound like they were necessarily more competent, but they knew that they weren't going to get away with an ambush. And so they were kind of behaving in a little bit more of a delicate way. Am I reading that right?
So I must tell you that from the minute we got to the refuge to we left, they were absolutely polite, and they were the most professional that I've ever seen. And again, I don't know if it's because maybe the negotiator didn't know what an elected official was, or didn't know who Graham was, or didn't realize the world was watching.
Right.
I don't know if he realizes that his behavior can affect laws that we can start writing. I'm not sure what twisted, because when I was on the phone the night before, it took everything for me not to reach through that phone and just want to touch Mark, because as I'm trying to calm them down, they are being very mean.
Right.
Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
I was just making sure everything was in order here. So, no, I agree. And to me, I mean, we know that the FBI is not principled in this. And that's why, I know I go out of my way to make sure that they're not getting the credit. But, and at the same time, I know they're humans. You saw their human side. You saw the emotion. And so at the same time, I want these people to change. I want these people that took oaths to the Constitution. I want them to step up and actually start defending it. But I think really what we saw was, here's what happens when the world is watching the FBI. Suddenly the bully behaves a little differently, and they have to be a lot more careful. But are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I thought you stopped talking because I don't know if it was my audio that cut out.
Yeah, why don't you? Your camera looks like it might be on, even though it's not really showing anything. If you X out your camera, it'll save you some bandwidth, and I think that might be part of the problem. There we go. And let me make sure. Okay, there you go. Okay, so tell us what we couldn't see. They're walking out, and just kind of tell us that story. What did you see there? Because it sounds like it was pretty powerful.
Yeah. So what you couldn't see. So when we first got there, they pulled the Bearcat up like 30 feet away from the tent. And I saw David walk out of the tent. He was like talking, and he like took his black like hoodie jacket and put it over his head. I think he had a beanie on, and then he took the beanie off of his head, and he went back into the tent. But then Sean and Sandy, now when we drove up with the Bearcat, we were 30 feet from the tent. Graham and I, we were allowed to talk on the microphone to let them know we were there, we were in position, we saw the tent, we see them, and now it's time for them to follow the orders of the FBI. So once they walk up that hill, we'll be up that hill waiting for them. So that's what took place first. And while we were there, and we said that, we saw the flag go up. There was sagebrush in our way, but it was Sandy and Sean. And I want all of our listeners to visualize this, because I really want to have a painter see the visual, which brings me to tears every time I think of this visual. Is you have an American FBI force team, and they're all fully armed, and then you have two Americans, Sean and Sandy, a married couple, and they're holding hands. And so Sean's left hand is holding Sandy's right hand, and Sandy is, I believe, holding Lavoy Finicum's Bible in her left hand, and Sean in his right hand is holding the American flag up. And so they're walking up as a couple with the American flag, surrendering to American FBI agents for sticking up for fellow American ranchers, the Hammonds. And so when I look at that photo in my mind and I see our American law, basically pointing guns at our Americans for being American, it's really heartbreaking. So
yeah, that's powerful. I mean, it's an image we should never see, we should never have to see. And so really you have civilians engaged in peaceful protests, just saying, hey, we just want the government to follow the law. And then you have them surrounded with essentially tacked out military forces that are ready to shoot them if they move wrong as they march out, with their heads held high, carrying an American flag.
Yes. So that was just really sad to me because, the torture that they went through, and then, so they were the first ones out. They put handcuffs on him. They put him in separate vehicles and they drove him they moved the Bearcat. They took Graham and I, and they took the Bearcat around to the top of that hill what they were walking up. And then they got Jeff to come out, and Jeff was holding a flag and his hand up. And they put him in cuffs and they put him in another car and they drove him up. So they let all three of them out, and Graham and I embraced them. And I want you to visualize all three of them were handcuffed with their hands in front of them. So when I approached Sandy, she lifted her hands up. So I kind of went under her arms so then she could hug me like a bear hug because her hands were handcuffed. And I hugged her and I told her I wouldn't leave her, and I told her I'd see her in court because that's our next battleground. And we did that with Sean and Jeff as well. And Graham, he's a big guy, so his hug totally engulfs your body.
Right.
So he hugged all of them, and then we all knelt down on the floor, and that's an image. There's an aerial image of that on the internet, and I'll email that to you.
Okay.
Where you see Graham and I and those three kneeling down on the floor, and it was pretty powerful. Then now I'm not on the FBI phone with David Fry. You and Chris Ann was talking to David Fry from the live stream. All of a sudden, one of the FBI negotiators of the phone says, Michele, David Fry wants to talk to you. He's not coming out. So I get on the phone. I'm like, David, what's going on? And then we started talking to him about his grievances. And then since I had Sean and Sandy and Jeff right there, I put Sandy on the phone with David. And Sandy was, saying, David, we're the Fabulous Four, and we made a pact, and they were really nice, and they weren't mean, and they were kind and gentle, and Michele and Graham is here. And so Sandy spoke with him for a few minutes, and then we put the phone up to Sean's ear, and we put the phone up to Jeff's ear, and Graham spoke to him for a few minutes. And so as you and Chris Ann is talking to him live stream, the five of us are talking to him on the telephone. And at the same time, Mike Arnold and Shelley Shelton, John Moore, and Heather Scott and Judy Boyles and our other legislators are down at this place called the Narrows listening in live stream. Well, Mike Arnold, I have to tell you, you got to meet that guy. It's Ammon Bundy's attorney, and the guy is like a superhero, energizer, just running everywhere. So Mike, runs to a phone, gets the prison guard to get Ammon on the phone, tells Ammon what's happening in like a minute, gets Ammon to record a message to David Fry. Then Mike runs up to like the first, block of cops, and he's like, we got to get this message up there. Well, they don't do anything. So then Mike texts the message to the FBI guy that he was working with the night before, because the 4.5 or 5 hours, I don't even remember how long we were on the phone together at Gavin, you and I and the guys. But at the same time, Mike Arnold was on the phone with the FBI and negotiating and doing all of that, and then telling me what we were allowed to do and what we weren't allowed to do. So Mike texts that message Mike Arnold texts Ammon Bundy's message to one of the negotiators, and the negotiator then gets it to Mark, either through Mark's phone or through another text message or whatever it was. So I'm talking to David a little bit more. We're going through his grievances. I'm basically explaining to him, my own personal story about why I have the same grievances. And then Mark, the negotiator, tells David Fry, something about a message. And I don't get to hear all the words from Ammon Bundy, but I know Ammon's voice.
Right.
And so he played that message, whatever it was, on the loudspeaker.
Right.
To David Fry.
Excellent.
And I want you to imagine how many hands that was in. I mean, Mike Arnold runs, gets Ammon on the phone from jail, records his message on his iPhone from another iPhone on speaker. So he gets Lissa Casey, which is Ammon's other attorney. So they have their iPhone. One's on speaker, one's recording it. They get it to where it's recorded, and they get it recorded good enough to text it to the FBI guys, for the FBI guys to then play it on their speaker on the loudspeaker.
Well, and that's a powerful thing. Mike was really a dynamo, it sounds like, in the background. And we know that to be the case because not only was he doing that, he was also talking to us in the background, trying to get us the same file. So it's, I mean, he was really on the move with his, and look, we got to use whatever technology and abilities we can to get the message through. But I think this really resonates too. First of all, and this may be just my opinion, to me, the FBI at this point went along with this because they had no choice. There was too much publicity. There was too many people watching. And so, the call comes through. I mean, they can't not play the call. But really, this really reaffirms the FBI never negotiated this situation, really. It was always the Patriots. It was Mike Arnold working in the background. It was the call from Ammon. It was the people that without fancy professional negotiators or without politics or anything like that, the people carried the message, and at the end, that final call from Ammon really cinched the deal, it sounds like.
I really have to tell you, I believe so. And, just the legislators, I got to tell you, all of us that were there, elected officials, we never felt more uncomfortable being in a state than we did in Oregon. And I've got Tony Shelton here with me. I don't know how much time we have, but as he was driving through Burns, this is something that this is breaking because we haven't told anybody this at all yet. So I'm gonna let Tony tell this story because this is very telling.
Well,
so this is Tony Shelton, Assemblywoman Shelley Shelton's husband, and Shelley Shelton, Tony Shelton, and John Moore, Assemblyman John Moore, were all driving in Tony's SUV
back to Portland.
Well, they were driving from Nevada to Portland, and they had to go through Burns, right?
We went through Burns.
Yeah, they went through Burns.
Okay, so we got the picture.
They were going through Burns on Wednesday at 2:00 in the afternoon because they were meeting me in Portland Wednesday at 8 p.m.
Okay.
So now they're driving through Burns, and guess what happens to these elected officials at 2 p.m. in Burns before the FBI goes in and starts doing their shenanigans? Here's Tony.
So I'm driving along like I normally do at Nevada speeds. We have normal speeds from the 2000s in Nevada as opposed to the 1975 speeds that they have in Oregon. And so I got my first ticket in over 100,000 miles. And a couple of things to notice is when we got stopped, Gavin, we've learned a lot from your videos. The very first thing that we were asked was, where are you coming from? And I didn't answer. And the next thing was asked is, where are you going? Are you going into Burns? What's in Burns? And I said, I don't know. You live here. You tell me. And so I was not going to give any of that information out. I just gave him my.
This is what? Yeah.
Oh yeah, we'll get there.
Okay.
I wasn't going to give any information out, but John Moore thought that we could just be on our way. He told them we're two legislators from Nevada and we're coming up here to help with the negotiations. And I'm not sure what all he told him, but they knew that we were They knew that there were two two elected officials from Nevada in the vehicle. So he gave me my ticket, my $270 ticket. It's my 270 and 100,000 miles. I can deal with that. But the one thing I did notice, the very first thing he told me before he started talking was, I have to notify you that you are being recorded. That was the very first thing. And this was the Oregon State Police.
Right.
So the Oregon State Police has body cams.
Right.
So
right.
Where are they?
Yeah, I see where you're going with this. Okay, continue.
So anyway, so they did have body cams. From there, we went and we gave John a tour. We had already been up there once, and so we gave John a tour of the area. So that John has 24 years in the military. He's been in Iraq. He's done lots of ambushes. So he said, I want to see everything involved. I want to know everything I want to know the layout of the land. So we drove around. We showed him. Most people don't understand. This wildlife refuge is 30 miles from the town of Burns. And it's 30 miles of two long stretches of almost 15 miles each that have anywhere along the way, they could have stopped these guys anywhere along the way, but they chose the path that they took. And so John was very concerned as to why, as many times as they went in and out of the refuge, why did they choose to do this? Number one, where there's no cell signal. Number two, where there's no trees. I mean, where there's all kinds of trees and things like that. And number three, where there wouldn't be any possibility of any media. So we showed him that. We took him up to where Lavoie was killed. We spent about 45 minutes of him walking around the area. And maybe you can talk to John to get a little more information on that. We actually had some wrong ideas about where things were, where they may have staged and things like that. But John had a very, very good idea. Right. But to give you an idea how hectic it was, we decided to go to John Day, and we were thinking about talking to the sheriff, but we decided not to, and went up the northern way to Portland, which is nothing but hills and mountains and no signal whatsoever, no phone signals at all, for about maybe 2 hours. And we were about 2.5 hours or maybe 3 hours out of there when our phone finally got a signal, and we heard what was going on back at the refuge. So we listened to you live for about 20 minutes in some town in the middle of nowhere. And then we decided we've got to turn around and go back, because at this point, Michele is coming from Portland. So we planned on coming and meeting her. So we turned around and we came back as fast as we could. We got into Burns at about midnight, and there were no hotels because the private contractors that were working for the FBI had bought up all the hotel rooms. There was not one hotel room left in Burns. And what's different from that is back during the beginning, when there were a lot of people there, a lot of those people stayed in Burns. But at this point, they bought up every hotel room. We called and checked, and the hotel said, nope, they've bought everything. So we had to end up going to Bend to meet with another 2 hours drive. In other words, we got to Bend at 2:30 in the morning, and then had to set the alarm for 4:30 to get up and go behind the FBI with Michele. The last thing Michele told me before she left out with right behind the FBI car was, do not lose us, do not let us get separated. So we're driving this 2-hour drive from Bend to Burns, and they stopped for gas. We lost them for a minute because we were late taking off. We were trying to catch up with them, and next thing I know, we're miles, and we finally get a text from Michele telling us what mile marker she's at, and we're actually miles and miles ahead of them at this point. So we stopped at a rest stop, waited for them to pass, and fell in behind them. They knew who we were, the FBI did, because they knew we were following, and they knew our vehicle. So we stepped in. So it was the FBI in a little small SUV or minivan. Then there was Michele and the two attorneys in a pickup truck, and us, me, Shelley, and John Moore behind them. Well, we didn't follow along very long before they pulled off in front of us and ordered Michele out of the pickup truck and into their car. And John Moore, we're on the phone with the Idaho representatives, and they're saying, don't let them take her away from you guys. You guys stick together. You're all working this together. And So John Moore gets out to run after him and tell him, no, you're not taking her. She's staying. We're all staying together. But he only got a few feet out of the car, and they took off. And they took off. They were driving 60 or 70 miles an hour the whole way, which we found kind of odd because they were late and they had an 8 a.m. Time they were supposed to be there. So next thing you know, they're driving 100 miles an hour. I think they were trying to lose us. But Mike, he's awesome. The attorney, he was right on their tail, and we were right on Mike's tail. So everybody's going 100 miles an hour, and then they go through a little town it's a 35 mile per hour zone, and they're going 85 through this town. So wow. Nice enough. The roads were long; you could see way in front of you, and we stayed with them all the way until they got to the airport. But it was a crazy ride. It was nerve-wracking because we had no idea what was actually going to happen here.
Well, we have a situation where the people fear the government instead of the government fearing the people. And look, the fact that the government, and let's be clear, I mean, I'm hearing from people down in Burns, and I just want to warn people down there too. I'm getting reports that the FBI is going around from house to house. They're trying to get people to turn each other in. They're asking questions, who took food out there and who did what, and do you know anybody? And of course, the loyalist people that support the tyranny and that don't like what the Patriots did, they're turning in their friends, it sounds like. And I'm not saying that all these people are getting arrested, but the FBI is trying to collect information. So look, be very careful. And this might be something I'll discuss in another video, but just remember, you don't have to answer questions. I don't care if they're local police or the FBI. If these guys show up at your door, turn a camera on and you ask them the questions, or you answer or just don't talk at all. If they have a warrant, I'm not saying pick a fight with anybody, but these guys come to people's door and they start asking questions, and people are kind of like, wow, the FBI is asking me questions. I guess I better answer. You don't have to answer questions of anybody. You have a right to not answer questions. And I just want to make that clear. But okay, thank you for that, Tony. Michele, let's kind of take this back on track now. So we kind of heard what happened and things went down. What's going on right now? Because look, I mean, Patriots all over America made a commitment to have these guys back. And a lot of people are asking, well, we've seen the tyranny. We saw the setup and the assassination of Lavoy Finicum. And personally, I don't even think it's open to dispute. I think it's completely clear. And then we saw the FBI trying to escalate. We saw the Patriots trying to de-escalate, and the Final Four going out of there peacefully. But now they're locked in a cell. They're locked in these courts where the judges and the prosecutors and everything are all on the same side. And from talking to you, because it sounds like you went down to the courtroom, it was pretty appalling. First of all, what happened in the court that next day? How is David doing? How are the others doing? Because there's lots of others that are being arrested too. I mean, basically they're rounding up dissenters at this point. Where do we stand now? So I guess, first of all, what did you see in court? Okay,
so when under Thursday afternoon, we headed back to Portland to basically pick up where we were supposed to be the night before. Right. So we headed back to Portland, and we went and we visited with Ammon Bundy. So myself and Mike Arnold and Lissa Casey went and did a contact visit with Ammon Bundy. We talked to him, and we told him what happened. And understand, Ammon was expecting us that Thursday morning in the jail. And instead, I want you to put yourself in Ammon Bundy's shoes right now. So Ammon wakes up Thursday morning, puts, they have TV or the news because he's not in solitary anymore. He wakes up Thursday morning to his attorney and his assemblywoman is in Burns. The four that are at the refuge are coming out, and his father is in jail locked up. So he's wow. Like, what happened in 24 hours, because because his attorney spoke to him, and we were going to be meeting with him in the morning. None of this was happening. Yes. So this was Thursday night. And then Friday, we go to the courtroom. Now, here's the big kicker. We go to the courthouse, and, we go through, it's kind of just like going through an airport. You have to go through security. We get up to the courtroom. We're in courtroom 11B as in boy. This courtroom only seats 36 people. There's over 100 people in line to get into the courtroom. Now, Mike Arnold, the other legislators, we're probably number 50 or 53. We got there an hour early, and by the time the courtroom doors opened, there was over 100 people. Mike Arnold, the superhero again, goes to the front of the line and says, listen, I have Assemblywoman Michele Fiore here. She promised these people that she would be here with them. Would anyone please give up their space in line just to make sure she gets in? And a woman did. There was this very nice lady, and she gave me her space in line. So at least the 4 that, I told them I'd be there for them would see me in court with them. And so when I got into the courtroom, I was so disappointed. Well, first of all, before I got into the courtroom, Gavin, I had to give the security my phone, and then they gave me a ticket. So I couldn't even have my phone in the courtroom to text or to let my legislators that couldn't get in the courtroom know what was happening. So there was zero communication in the courtroom. And I'm looking around the courtroom for cameras. So this way we can order, like the transcript and the video of what's happened. There's no cameras in the courtroom. There's no way of knowing what happened in that courtroom unless you were in the courtroom and you have a photographic memory to rewrite everything. And so I was disappointed in that. And so I got to see, the 4, and then I got to hear a couple more that came out. And one really sticks out was this 25-year-old, and his name was Jeff Stanek. And he served in the Army for 3 years, honorably discharged, just a cool, clean-cut kid, had an armed security job. He was supposed to be starting Wednesday. He's not even convicted yet, but he's not allowed to be on social media. I mean, all of the rules, and these are just fast notes that I was taking, all of the conditions that this guy, that they put on him, and he's not even convicted. And he can't have a job as an armed security. So now they're basically taking money away from him, and he's not convicted. He can't have firearms. He can't be in a home where there's firearms. And if there are firearms, they have to be locked in a safe. I mean, are we going to tell the intruder or bad guy, wait a second, let me open up my safe and get my shotgun? I mean, right. I was so hurt because every time I would hear the judge or the U.S. attorneys against Americans, that was another thing that just ripped my heart apart. We're in this federal courtroom, and it's the United States versus Americans.
Right. Absolutely.
It's just appalling.
Well, and okay, I just want to pause right there because we got all these people listening to the live stream. I want people to really let this sink in because we need to understand this. I mean, Ammon knows this. Yes, the battle we're in is in the courtroom right now, but the courtroom, by and large, justice in the courtroom is lost. And what we're really seeing here, and just think about what Michele just described, and I've seen this in the courts. I've been arrested in a courtroom for trying to stand up and say, hey, you guys got to follow the Constitution. And so the message here is very clear. These are not constitutional courts in any fashion. And we don't even have to get into all the conspiracies about constitutional stuff and this and that. I mean, on the surface level, these are secret courts, guys. These are secret courts. They're intentionally scuffling people away where the populace cannot watch. They're preventing cameras from being in the courtroom. And we've got to do something about this. I don't expect much justice from these courts anyways, but I can assure all of America this. If we do not get cameras and publicity in those courtrooms, just like we did by getting publicity to the Final Four on that refuge, every single one of these trials will be a kangaroo trial. Even if we do get cameras, we are going to see lawless rulings and lawless behavior from this bench. But the light of day on this would make a lot of difference. We have to start demanding that these courtrooms be opened up and that all this be put out there. These are secret courts. And so they're spinning and they're playing games. Oh, well, you can get a transcript later, or you can do this, or you can do that. That's not a public court. The court is a quintessential public forum. And for them to be preventing all of this stuff, and they're doing it in the name of false security. Now, picture this. Basically, it sounds, Michele, like we have the judges saying, well, we're afraid of what people might do to us, so we don't want our faces out there. They have no problem taking the Patriots' faces, sending them out to the news media and saying, hey, write an article about how these guys are terrorists, even though they've been convicted of nothing, and we're going to lock them in a cell for the next few months and see what happens, and we're going to control this message the whole way. These are secret courts. They are lawless courts. This is not due process. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a kangaroo court that you're seeing right now, and you need to understand the gravity of the situation. The courts are not operating under the rule of law.
Well, then here's the other scary part. As I'm hearing like the judge question and ask questions, I am first of all, I have a few weapons, and you know, a Glock handgun, yes, it's a firearm, and yes, it shoots bullets, and yes, I get that. But when a judge is talking about a Glock, let's say 17 or whatever the Glock was, as serious weaponry, you know, I'm thinking like an armored vehicle with an M50 is serious weaponry. A hammer that a bad guy on crack takes to someone's skull is serious weaponry. You know, so when you're listening to as a pro Second Amendment individual, you definitely understand verbiage that is anti Second Amendment. Right. And then I'm sitting here thinking to myself, oh my God, they're setting these trials for April. The prosecutor is going to get everyone on that juror that is anti Second Amendment. Like I'm petrified. I am so scared of the courts being unjust, and I don't even know. I'm lost for words.
Well, and let me just fill in for a second there then, because I can guarantee you guys they are not going to get due process. They're already not getting due process. And this goes back to Michelle's comments earlier. They're sending people out of these courtrooms and releasing them on bail and demanding that they don't even communicate with the public. The only criminals here is the government and the courts, guys, right up to these federal judges. And I don't know the federal judge's name offhand, but we need to start getting that out there. People need to know these people that are abusing the law. This is not a court of law we're dealing with. This is a court who is in every sense breaking the law. And make no mistake, I mean, when a judge says, oh, I'm going to release you, but you can't talk to you can't put anything on Facebook, and you can't talk to people, and you can't tell your story. This isn't law. This is, you are guilty unless you can prove yourself innocent, and we'll let you try to prove yourself innocent on our terms alone. And I've seen this firsthand. I've stood in a courtroom. I stood up in a courtroom, and there's a video of this on my channel, and told this judge, I shook that Constitution at her, and I said, you are a criminal. You're the one that needs to be arrested. And of course, I got drug out of the courtroom and arrested. Now, this was at a local court. And so this poison, guys, goes all the way down to the local level. The rule of law, and it is really scary, Michele. But at this point, I mean, we've got our appeal to heaven and we've got exposure. We need to get cameras in those courtrooms. It is unacceptable that this stuff is not being broadcast, because these are unquestionably being operated as secret courts. They're intimidating and coercing people into not speaking. The people of Burns are still being terrorized by the FBI. They're being pestered. They're being harassed. They're being questioned. I think we need to realize where we're at. And so if you have anything to add to that, that's fine. But also what I'd like from you, though, is how are they doing? Are we hearing from them? I mean, I'm assuming, did they put these guys now in solitary confinement, and are they being treated? You know, that's not being treated well, but did they look okay? And are we hearing from them, and what can we do to help them?
I'm going to pass it to Assemblywoman Shelley Shelton sitting here with me, and she's going to tell you some things right now on that. Assemblywoman Shelley.
Hey, Gavin.
Hey,
nice to talk with you.
Yeah, likewise.
I know you probably know the ins and outs of the courts and how everything works, but the general public doesn't, and it's so difficult to even get to talk to somebody that is being incarcerated, or get in touch with them or get information about them. So on my website, I have some information about a lot of the people that have been incarcerated. It is a ton of information. It was put out on Facebook last night by Maureen Peltier, I think. I haven't been able to verify all this information, but from the people that I have been able to speak to, I've gotten that this is a pretty reliable source. And I also want to let you know, or your listeners need to know exactly what to do in order to keep in contact with, even if you're just going to send a letter to any of these, because it's important that while you're incarcerated, if you can keep in touch with people in the outside, it helps a lot. I mean, right. One of the notes that are on here, Pete Santilli, I thought this was kind of good. He wants to just have people write him funny letters or, letters that will make him laugh. Because, when you're in a situation like that, it's like you're in a totally different world. And you said something earlier that is so true. They are guilty until they can prove themselves innocent. And that's not the way it's supposed to be. But that's the world that we're living in here today. Right. And many people are being treated like that. So I would just encourage all your listeners to go to Assemblywoman Shelley Shelton. It's on my Facebook page. There's about 3 pages of information about different people being held in different jails. I think the whole intent is to, transport them all up to Oregon. Maybe that's where the judges are favorable for them. You had asked about the judge's name. When we were there on Thursday, the judge that presided over those hearings was John Acosta.
Okay.
So I just wanted to
awesome. Okay, I appreciate that. That's great. So where can they find? What's your website again? Where can they find that info?
It's on my Facebook page, and so if you just search for Assemblywoman Shelley Shelton, it's SHELLY and then SHELTON. I just copied all this information and put it on there, and it has some of the people's attorneys' names, some of their numbers as far as, they give you their inmate numbers, how to contact them, because people don't even know how to, if you have never gone through something like this before, you don't even know how to make a phone call to these people. And so this has a little information.
Right. That's great.
A little information about how to get in touch with them. And addresses are on here. Telephone numbers are on there.
Okay, good. So go to the Assemblywoman's page and check that out. And then, and also I did see this, and we're actually parsing this too. What we're going to try and do is go look at what's there now. We're trying to refine that data more, along with each name, get links to their fundraiser pages and stuff like that. Because look, I want to call out America a little bit, guys. We said, first of all, America said they would be there in Oregon, and all of this happened. And so we can point fingers, or we can learn, and we can move on. Then, we're saying, well, we're going to be there in court. And so now there's these fundraiser pages are starting to come up. And I see this on the local level too. People always have an excuse. Oh, I can't show up in court. I have to watch football, or I have to go to work. Or, people's life, their liberty, and their property, their honor, it's on the line here. And we really need to be supporting. We need to be supporting the cause, the message of liberty, and we need to be supporting these guys in jail. Because, Shelley, and you mentioned this as well, I've sat in these jails. I've been arrested. When they put you in these jails, we got to start loving our neighbor. There's this common thing of, well, jails shouldn't be comfortable. These people are criminals. No, they're not. Most of the people in jail have not been convicted. Most of the people in jail will never be convicted by a jury of their peers, because they will never even get that far. They will be bullied by multiple charges and prosecutors until they plea out on the charge the prosecutors want. And so even people that have committed genuine crimes, most of them, I would argue all of them, aren't even getting due process in these courts. So we need to understand how bad it is, how isolated these guys are, try to reach out to them, try to show up in courts. And this goes for people locally too. But back to, the list Shelley was talking about, find these people, find out how you can help. I'm really disturbed, guys. I'm really disturbed because somebody can do a fundraiser for a puppy that got hit by a car and raise more in 24 hours than we have for our patriots in Oregon. I'm not kidding. This is ridiculous. It's time to start stepping up, put your money where your mouth is, and decide whether or not you're going to step up and support liberty and support the patriots. And I know we're all in different places, so some of us show up and some of us work hard behind the scenes, and some of us give money, but we've got to get engaged is what I'm saying. So.
And Gavin, what you're doing is helping immensely, because we have to educate our neighbors. If they don't understand what really happened up there, if they're just listening to the 6 o'clock news, people that just listen to the 6 o'clock news do not want to help any of these people because they think they're terrorists. And that's not what happened there. That is not what those people are. So if we can educate our neighbors and get them come together and join together for this cause, we can do way more than that we could even imagine. and you educating people with your YouTube videos, because I'll tell you, I've talked to some of the family members that have had the FBI come to their house, and a normal person wants to help. A normal person wants to be helpful. So what do you think they have done? They have talked to the FBI thinking that they're helping. In essence, it wasn't until the family members got inside the courtroom that they realized they made a mistake, and they should not have talked to the FBI. And that was telling to me there that they were willing to help until they got inside the court system and realized what actually happens in there. Then they knew, wait, let me take a step back.
Wow. What's happening in these courtrooms is not loving our neighbor. It's not Christian. It's not liberty. It's not America. And this is what I would say. I mean, look, you want to do a field trip with your church? Go down to the court on Monday and watch people get abused. You want to be sobered about the state of our nation? Watch what they're doing. We have to start educating and loving our neighbor. And Shelley and Michele and all of you guys that were down there, I mean, I think this is really important too. First of all, let's emphasize anybody can do this. Anybody can take a camera and start talking. You know, anybody can use whatever skills you have to get the message out. And for you guys, this is great too, because let's face it, most of the world looks at legislators and elected officials and be like, yeah, they're going to be a day late and a dollar short, and they're going to make a statement once it's safe. And you guys showed up there even though it wasn't safe, and America appreciates that. And people are going to be looking at you. Really, you're setting an example for legislators of this is how you represent. And so please keep doing that. And what I'd love to see from you legislators too, you know, I talk to legislators behind the scenes, and they tell me, you know, yeah, well, this happened. You should have seen, you know, you should have seen what happened on the floor yesterday. It was ridiculous. And what I would love to see, and I'm sure America would love to see this all the way up to Congress, when it gets out for the day, go out and turn on your live stream, turn on your cell phone, you know, stand on the steps and tell the world what the people that are supposed to be representing just did. Because I'm guessing that the statists don't really support you anyhow. So why worry about it?
You are right. You are so right
about that one. No, I mean, I know you guys are catching a lot of grief for this. So do either of you, Michele, I mean, what else, you know, the message here is liberty. The message is what can people do? They can start carrying this message, right? They can start supporting by showing up, by supporting with donations. I mean, as bad as these courts are, I said this in a video last week, you know, because people will say, well, we just should opt out of the courts. Look, you go to the court with a gun at your head. You don't have an option whether to go into the court. And, you know, it reminds me of Atlas Shrugged. And when he was standing up there and he says, you know, I don't recognize the authority of this court to try me. I'm here at the point of a gun. And that's really what we're dealing with here in our courtrooms, especially, you know, in the courtrooms like this. So what can people do? What else do you guys have to say about all this?
Well, so here's what I'm learning. I have to tell you, you know, when I had Cliff Gardner literally drive from Northern Nevada to Las Vegas yesterday to talk with me, and he's been battling with the BLM and these courts for over 30 years. And he knew the Hammonds back in the 90s, you know, when the shenanigans started. And this is just a man. And I mean, you can look his court case up. He's lost it twice. But he educated me on the Article 3 court and Article 4 court. And, you know, they're supposed to be this federal judge and this federal court is supposed to be Article 3, but it's not, because under the Article 3 court system, it's supposed to follow the Constitution to where the citizens have rights. Right. Under the Article 4 court, what they say, and when you read all of the verbiage from the courts, it basically says that they are plenary and without limitation. Well, what does that mean? Plenary and without limitation. That basically means with they have no limitations. They do not have to go to the U.S. Constitution to protect its citizens in an Article 4 court. So what that really truly means is if they're in an Article 4 court, it's a violation of their civil rights. People have to look this up. Plenary, plenary, and without limitation. That's what they're writing on all of that. That's typically an Article 4 court, according to Cliff Gardner. So if they were truly in an Article 3 court, because this is a federal case, they would have to be under the U.S. Constitution, which protects its citizens. If it's not, and understand, just as I'm learning this, I mean, there's so much to learn, and I did not study federal law, but as I'm learning this, so are the attorneys and so are the judges. Everyone doesn't have the answers. I mean, they take their bar and then it's all, hands-on experience. We're going to go through this. We're going to go through that. This one,
Right.
And so they're supposed to follow written law, and they're supposed to follow, the CFR, which is the Code of Federal Regulations. And the Code of Federal Regulations is different per court and different per, let's say, the BLM and this agency and that agency. All of these agencies have a different set of rules and policies. And if it's in the Article 4 court, so they go by, well, according to this regulation on the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations from BLM or the Department of Interior or the ATF, everything is different. So it's convoluted. So what I'm saying to you is the federal laws are convoluted, and then the judges are deciding these men's fate by convoluted written federal law.
Right. And really, I would go as far to say what we've seen from these public officials, from the FBI, and right up to these courts. To me, this is, and I'm speaking constitutionally, I'm not just rambling. To me, this really does fall under the definition of treason. These people are laying war against the laws of America and against the people of America. And I want to come to your point, Michele, because first of all, we need to read the Constitution. We need to understand the law. But people contact me a lot and they say, well, Gavin, how do you know all these laws? And I really make lawyers mad because, because I know the law. Most of the time I know the law better than the lawyers. And what I've realized is for most of the lawyers, and we have exceptions to this, but for most of the lawyers, they didn't really learn law. They learned protocol, manipulation, procedure, and games is really what most of them learned. And so I talk to a lawyer and I talk about real law, and they'll say, well, no, the statute, blah, blah, blah. And I said, no, that's overridden by this amendment of the Constitution or by Article 1, and they get all frustrated. Well, no, I mean, that's the law and I'm the lawyer. And what I've realized is we've come to see lawyers as people who have a bar exam, who have a bar license. And even my lawyer argued against this in my case because Stephen Pidgeon even recognized that this is a farce. There was no bar in 1775. A lawyer is someone who understands the law. So we have an immense number of the civilianry that are far more lawyers than most of the people calling themselves lawyers that are running these courtrooms and that are prosecuting. But of course, if you show up to represent, you'll end up with a gun in your head and be locked in a cell too, even though it's completely contrary to the Second Amendment. So, but to your larger, I mean, not the Second Amendment, the Sixth Amendment. So to the larger point, understand that law is liberty and the fundamental principles of law. I mean, if you want to take it all the way back, and I do this a lot, law is, I'm going to go back to Jesus. I'm going to give the 30-second crash course. Law is love God. Now that's moral law. Okay. Then civil law, love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. You can't abuse your neighbor if you love your neighbor as yourself. So let's take that forward to common law, life, liberty, and property. Anything, any legislation, any statute, any act that does not protect equally and for all life, liberty, and property is not law. This is then carried forth into our constitutions on the state and the federal level, which say, hey, these are our rights, these are the limitations of government, and they will act within these. And so when government goes out and they make statutes and laws and articles that are contrary to our Constitution, as Alexander Hamilton said in Federalist 78, anything that violates the Constitution is not law. It's automatically void. But I want to go beyond that, and because I really want people to understand this, because they're always saying, well, this is the law, or this person can't own a gun, or they get to restrict this. No, shall not means shall not. And I love John Locke's quote. This is before the Constitution. This is 1600s. But his political philosophy is a lot of what our Constitution was founded on. And listen to this. It's Old Englishy, but listen. Wherever law ends, tyranny begins. If the law be transgressed to another's harm, and whosoever in authority exceeds the power given to him by the law, parentheses, our Constitution, and makes use of the force he has under his command to compass that upon the subject, which the law allows not, our rights, the Constitution, life, liberty, and property, close parentheses, ceases in that to be a magistrate, and acting without authority may be opposed as any other man who by force and rate invades the right of another. These judges are not acting in law. We have to show up in court because the gun is to our head, but we need to understand as Americans what our rights are, what law is, and we need to understand that when judges and magistrates and politicians act outside, wholly outside the authority of law, what they're doing is not law, it's lawless legislation, and the people need to oppose it with principle and liberty.
That's good, Gavin.
So, all right. Is there anything? Were you able to visit with David or any of the Final Four, Michele? Or
so no, I wasn't able to visit with them because you have to be on the list first of all,
okay.
And then secondly, it takes time. So I think like they went through their process late Thursday because you got to think from our ride Burns to by the time we got to the jail, it was like 8:30 at night. And so they have to put a request in by some kind of slip for who can talk to them and who can visit with them. So Friday when I was there, and if you want to go and visit, you have to go through a whole background security check. I mean, there's no, just because I'm an elected official, I get to go in. Nope. So I have to do everything the regular way. I have to get my background. I have to do all that to be able to visit with anyone. I got to visit with Ammon Thursday night because of his attorneys. I got to visit with Cliven because Cliven was smart enough. The first thing he did was put me on the list.
Now, how is Cliven doing? Because he's older than a lot of the folks that are in there, and you know how he's holding up.
Well, I'll tell you. I think I spoke to his attorney today, and his attorney was really, really, really upset about the treatment because it looks like the bottom line is there's no Oregon charges against Cliven, and he flies into Portland to go visit his sons, and they arrest him and they detain him. So it's a vindictive prosecution. It's really bad. And then today they were his attorney was asking for a release, but the pretrial folks, did not recommend it, and the judge wouldn't hear of it. And I don't know who the judge was today because his attorney was trying to get me on the phone, and the prosecutor had agreed, according to the attorney, for me to be on the phone as a witness. Basically, he's complied with everything in Nevada as far as, if he needed to show up for court or whatever they were doing. Right. I know his attorney here in Nevada. But the bottom line is I wasn't there. I did write a letter for his attorney to present. The judge wouldn't see or look at any of it. So that's where we are.
Okay, well, we'll just keep up the fight, and I just want to encourage people to really stay engaged. Keep your prayers going, but also take actual action. Support these guys in whatever way you can, whether it's showing up in court or sending money to support their cause. And I'm going to be working on trying to parse that list even better, get more links to their fundraising pages and stuff like that. Because a lot of these guys, look, they've still been arresting people, and they may be arresting more. I know people like me half expect that they could show up at the door anytime. And so they want to cut us off from communicating.
The Las Vegas Sun today called me, our newspaper in Las Vegas. The Las Vegas Sun today called me and said, so Michele, do you think you're going to get arrested? And I said, that'll be about the stupidest thing they do.
But nothing is past these people. And this is the thing. I'm really disturbed. This is the country my kids are growing up in. We are more like a third world country. And let me correct that. There's third world countries that have more liberty, more civil rights, and more law happening far and away in their courts than we do. And that's a scary, scary thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so this falls on us, guys. It falls on all of us to take action, to do something about this. And, my appeal is to heaven, but that doesn't mean I can just sit on my laurels. We have to try and do something come what may. The people that founded this nation, despite their imperfections, they said, we want liberty. And they put it all on the line. It wasn't, and we're still debating about whether we're going to make the football game in this country. We really got to get serious. We've got to step up, and we've got to take a stand. We've got to understand that, the government officials that are out there abusing and extorting and harassing and collecting and jailing and all this stuff. They're not working for the people. They're working as criminals. And we got to stop. We got to not be false patriots. We got to stop going for, the pageantry. And we really got to say, okay, what's liberty? What's law? What's loving my neighbor? And am I upholding that? There's skip the race. There's no blue line. The police are either defending our liberty or they're not. There's no, you're a hero because of the uniform you wear. There's no, you're a bad guy because of what faction you're with or the color of your skin. We need to unite in liberty and start working together and try to restore this, because we're kind of at the end of our rope here, Michele, I think. And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I hope I am. But it seems like...
You know what? I have to tell you, both my sessions, the last 2 sessions I served as an assemblywoman, I sat on the Judiciary Committee, because across America, and I have to say, and this should really hit home with everyone, Republicans and Democrats and independents and libertarians, every single person should absolutely concur that we definitely need justice reform. America incarcerates the most. We are not, there's countries out there that are much larger than us, but yet we incarcerate the most. And the numbers that we're reading at the highest, like 3 to 1, are the prisons. That's not even including the counties and the jails. So I just have to say that we definitely have to take a look. Now, I got to tell you, I am tough on crime. Gavin, when I tell you I'm tough on crime, there was bills up there that, wanted to do longer sentences and this and that for sex traffickers and pimps and rapists. And I'm like, listen, and I said this on air, I got crucified for it. But the legislators that were coming before my committee saying, oh, wow, whining, we want more time for this guy and we want more time for this guy. Well, first of all, I don't want taxpayers to pay a lot of money for bad guys. So if they're really serious about these real bad guys, castrate them. So I throw that out there. I get totally attacked. So I want you to understand, I am tough on crime, but I am also, when you're in prison for not harming another person, right. I'm sorry, but the taxpayers should not be paying for that either.
Well, really, we got to get back to that, to what a crime is. There's no, most of the time, there's no criminal intent. There's no victim. And so it goes 2 ways. And here's something that I would have you legislators consider too. Now that you're seeing our courts, I fully agree that crimes with victims should have appropriate punishments. But knowing how corrupt the courts are, I am reluctant to dish out any extreme punishments until the courts are fixed, because I honestly don't believe anybody, even real criminals, is genuinely getting due process in these courts. And we're seeing this more and more as it comes out that guys that were put away for murder 20 years ago were actually just framed by the prosecutor because he wanted the conviction. And so we need to be careful with that too, because we're seeing this like in Okanagan County with James Fair, them trying to frame him. We see guys like Schaefer Cox put away, Jeff Winehouse. And so I think until we fix the courts, really, and this is something that's easy for patriots to ignore this because it's scary. They don't even like to show up in court. But look, first of all, we got to stop the victimless convictions. But really, we can't have liberty and law in this country when we have criminals sitting on the bench.
Well, Gavin, there's one more thing that we need to consider here also. This is Tony Shelton.
Tony.
One more thing to consider also is this travesty that's happened, the skirting of the Constitution with all of this charge stacking and plea bargaining. Okay, 90% of all cases are plea bargained. Exactly. Now, a lot of people might say, "Oh, that's letting the criminals off easy. They're able to plea bargain." Well, in reality, that's not what's happening. What's happening is they're stacking so many charges on these people, whether they're innocent or not. They go ahead and plead guilty, or they plead an Alford plea or a no contest or something like that, just to get out of jail because they are scared to death that everything is stacked against them. And that is skirting the Constitution. Now, why can they do that? The reason they can do that is because we haven't filled up the courts with hundreds and thousands of people who assert their rights and say, I will take a jury trial. If we did that, they wouldn't have time to prosecute all these victimless crimes.
No, they wouldn't. But what's happening, Tony, and I've seen this firsthand, is as soon as they get you in the system, and we're seeing this even with the few people from Oregon that they're letting go, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't have a gun. If you violate any of these things, you'll be going back to prison. They absolutely terrorize the accused. He's not innocent until proven guilty. And so most of these people, and this goes back to this larger conversation, really there shouldn't even be plea deals, arguably, but what's really happening here is most of the people that even committed real crimes never got their day in court. Most of the people sitting in prison right now never got their day in court. So number one, people can start doing that. And I would absolutely say, for those misdemeanor crimes and stuff in particular, where you can't, they're not going to put you away for a long time. Demand a jury trial on every one of those. I mean, break down the system. That won't fix the courts, but it might slow them down. But in the larger sense as well, we really need to grasp how corrupt it is. There's no fixing, there's not going to be a top-down fixing of these courts. Look, it says everything that none of the current presidential candidates have said, I would pardon these Oregon patriots because they're defending the Constitution. That says everything. These guys are not really stepping up to defend the Constitution. We've got to stop playing politics. We've got to start stepping up. And then the final leg in that court system, and really I think, short of divine intervention, I think the only way that they're going to get justice in these courts is the one thing that still remains, and one of the things we fought the American Revolution for, and that's jury nullification. But the thing is, they won't even let the lawyers talk about this. And so we could start some campaigns down in Oregon to try and educate people on jury nullifications. I've put out some videos on it. You have, is it the National Liberty Alliance that does, Fully Informed Jury Association does a lot of stuff on that. But you got Pete Santilli in jail for reporting the news. You've got patriots in jail for defending the Constitution. In every sense, the criminals are the ones pointing the finger and locking the jail cell. I mean, we got everything backwards and turned upside down. The problem is that even if we educate the jurors, and this is what a lot of people don't realize, they say, well, I'd rather be tried by 12 than carried by 6. Well, guess what? They're going to allow the jury they want in that room. They're going to allow the audience they want. They're already operating secret courts with no cameras, and people can't get in there to see what's going on. What do we expect? And so we need to start being realistic about these things. We need to figure out what we can do. Let's get cameras in those courtrooms. Let's see if we can start educating people, from our legislators to people like me and my brother to our pastors. The pastors have to start stepping up in the pulpit and stop hiding. And I would call to people like Franklin Graham, stop making excuses for the government. Start stepping up. Law is not what government says. Law is the foundation of law. It's our God-given rights. It's what our Constitution says. And so in the implicit and literal sense, when we say, well, we need to obey the law, the patriots in Oregon were obeying the law. The FBI and the government officials were disobeying the law, not only under moral law, but under this Constitution right here and the law of our land. So look, I can ramble in any video and try to put this stuff out there, and I will certainly be doing more. Michele, where can people find you and anybody else, that was over there? Let's kind of shout out the names of the legislators and stuff that were down on the ground. And do you have anything before we close here that you want to add to this?
I do want to add that I really urge everyone to get involved with their elected officials. If you don't know who they are, find out. If you're not registered to vote, vote. Because if you don't vote, you are voting anyway, because your lack of vote will put that person in that position. Sometimes it's 2 to 9 votes short of getting, one or the other elected. So I just want people to, they can go to my website, which is michelefiore.com, and it's Michele, MicheleFiore, michelefiore.com. It is very, very important that they get to meet their legislators. They get to meet the people that are running to represent them, and look at their history. I say to folks, if your representative is asking you for your vote, ask them, what have they done for the community? What have they done for the people that they're asking for their vote from? Because we have a lot of like campaigning, say whatever, people want to hear to get elected. And then we have people that are actually true elected officials with a record, with a past, and with a reputation for standing up for people.
Right. Yeah.
So
and we need to get those people in there.
And Shelley Shelton, what is your email?
Shelley Shelton, Nevada@gmail.
Okay. And what's your website? Shelley Shelton.
ShelleySheltonNevada.com is your website.
Yep. ShelleySheltonNevada.com is her website. We have John Moore. We have so many people that, then we have our Idaho We had Heather Scott there and Judy Boyles and all of their emails. We have also our Coalition of Western States, COWS, that they can go onto that website and see the elected officials there. We have Matt Shea out of Washington. We have Kelly Townsend out of Arizona. We have about 12 Arizona reps. We have Utah reps, and we have a ton of people that were out there. And again, you just really have to get to know your representatives and call them out. Call your representatives out publicly.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially on the local level, get the vote out. And I want to preface what you said, because I know a lot of people have this concern. I don't compromise my principle in voting anymore. If there's not a candidate worth voting for, then find one, find a write-in, do something. Don't sell out liberty to the lesser of two evils. Step up and start finding people. Run yourself if you have to. Find a sheriff, find representatives like Michele that are actually doing something. Don't just listen to what they say at the political forums and see who's the best speaker or has the best ads, because most people are voting in America on ignorance. And we're not simply going to fix this at the ballot box. It's going to take real action. The ballot box is kind of something everybody should be doing, just like sharing things on Facebook, but everybody's got to get involved. So Michele, thank you for being down there in Oregon, and to all you guys down there, and to Mike Arnold and to everybody working behind the scenes. I mean, there's lots of people that get credit, and it's most of all, we need to appeal to heaven. God needs to give us a path, because we are in a serious mess here, America. And so I would put it on that. But I think we're about done here if you have nothing else to add. Nathan's been over here moderating, so I appreciate that, and some of my other family members and friends as well. There's always lots of people working on the back end to keep the message going. Do any of you have any final words?
No, I just want to thank your dad for his beautiful prayers when we were going through that with talking with the guys in the refuge.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate it. That was Grant Syme, and he's he knows where it's at. So, all right. Well, hey, I want to thank you all for listening. I'm sure we'll be back and do this again, and I'm going to keep getting the short, sweet videos out to try and deal with the points. I'll try to keep you updated as much as I can, and hopefully Michele and the other representatives will do that as well. We'll try and stay up to date and make sure we're supporting our guys behind bars. But we've got to stand. We've got to rise. And I'm tired. I'm done playing politics. I'm done with the excuses. And let me, to the cowards and haters of liberty, let your names fade into the night. Let our posterity say these. Let our posterity never say that to these people that oppose liberty. Let them never say that these were men to emulate. Let them say that your approval is not needed, and that your willingness to be trampled defines insanity for those with the courage to love their neighbor and stand principled for liberty. And that's what we need to do. That's how we need to stand. This falls to us. If we don't do something, we pass on the shackle of a slave to our children and to our grandchildren. Hey, thank you all. Good to have you here, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yes, thanks. Good night, Gavin.
Good night, all. Okay.